Hi everyone, welcome back. This is lesson 2 of my FluteBox Basics Masterclass series. Today we're going to learn some more sounds based on a different part of the drum kit. But before we do, let's do a little warm-up of the face that we learned last time. So, if you remember, we talked about warming up different bits of the face using our hands and using some different positions. So first of all, let's think about the cheeks, so we can give them a little bit of rub. Okay, and then we can also add in our hamster face there, so we're blowing up our cheeks and just stretching all of the muscles around our cheeks. Then let's use our thumbs. So last time we took our thumbs, put them right underneath our ears and just ran them down the side of our head so that we're stretching all the muscles here that get particularly tight around the jaw. And then we had some stretches for the lips. So if you remember, we have this kind of lifting up position, rather like a kind of rabbit position. So that helps to stretch here. And then you can stretch right around the bottom with the fly on the nose. So if you imagine you've got a fly on your nose and you're trying to blow it off. So see if you can feel those different stretches really working those muscles so that we're ready to make a start. Okay, so let's take a look at the part of the kit that we're going to use to base our sounds on today. So here we have our drum kit again, and we're going to be looking at one of the cymbals today. So there are 3 different cymbals, and the shortest of those cymbals actually contains 2 cymbals put together. So it's like 2 smaller cymbals, one on top of the other, and this is what we call the hi-hat. So rather like the bass drum that we looked at last time, the hi-hat is also controlled with the player's foot, so it uses a pedal, and you'll notice that the 2 hats are kind of sat together at the moment, so that's what we call a closed hi-hat position. If the player then puts their foot on the pedal, what happens is the 2 hats open, and that's what we call an open hi-hat. So we've got closed hi-hat, open hi-hat. The closed hat makes a less resonant sound, so if you imagine when it's closed and then the drum player hits it with their stick, it's going to just make a sound and then stop. There's not going to be any resonance to that sound. If the hi-hat is open, then they hit the top hat with the stick and the 2 cymbals are going to still shake and cause some resonance. So the hi-hat open has a more lasting effect, whereas the hi-hat closed has a single sound. So the 2 sounds that we're going to produce today are the closed hi-hat and the open hi-hat. The closed is a t sound, t, so a straight sound with nothing resonating afterwards, and the open sound is the t, 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 so it has a t and an s following to mimic the open hi-hat sound. So it's easier to make these sounds than it was the bass drum sound that we looked at last lesson, but it's harder to put them together with the flute, and I think that's because you're lifting up your lips here to produce a t, rather than the bass drum, the lips are more forward. Now, there's also an inhaled version of this sound which allows you to breathe at the same time as making the sound, so it's really useful. You might think it's a more advanced thing to try, but actually I think it's really good to try this right from the beginning, right as you're practicing your exhale sound as well. So we'll have a little look at that later on. So before we get to the sound, let's take a minute to think about the open and closed throat positions that we learnt about last lesson, because the T and TS sound needs a closed position rather than the open position which we needed for the bass drum. So if you remember, we tried 3 different sounds which helped us to discover whether our throat was open or closed. The first sound that we looked at was the ng sound, and it's this sound that's giving us our closed position in our throat rather than the R, which was more open at the back, and the or, which really opened the throat at the bottom. So take a second to just think about the ng sound and the position that you can feel that your larynx and your throat is in as you do that. When you're happy that you've found that position, then you can start to build up the sound. So we're going to start by just saying a t, t, t. Then if we take away the voice from that sound, we get the t on its own. T, t, t. Now in order to make this a stronger sound, you can think about your support. So if you give that a little bit more support, then you're going to find you make a stronger sound. T, So there's our closed hi-hat sound. To make that into an open hi-hat sound isn't too tricky. All we're going to do is add an S at the end. So you've got your t, and then you're just going to make that go into an S. So t, 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 t. So the difference between the two would be a t for the closed and a t, t for the open. So closed, t, open, t. Now some composers only use the t sound in their arrangements and compositions, some just use the t sound. So there is a little bit of ambiguity between the two. I tend to use the t sound when I'm writing things because I just think it has a bit more pop and it's a bit more exciting. So let's go back to our score that we had a look at a lesson and see how that's written down. So here's our score, and we talked about the bass drum sound, the B, last time. If we look to the third note along, you'll see that there's a TS. So the TS is the hi-hat open sound, which we've just been looking at, and on this particular score we'd be using Aeolian sounds with that sound. It is possible to do a full flute sound as well, and that's something we'll look at later on. Before we have a go at trying some of these sounds with the track, let's just talk about breathing. In lesson 1, we said that it's a good idea to try and get in the habit of taking little breaths as often as you can when you're flute boxing, because that way the beat isn't disturbed. So let's try doing some ts sounds and then taking a breath in. So you'll do your ts and then breathe in. Ts, ts. So let's now try that with our track. We've got a nice upbeat track to have a go at this with today. So first of all, I'd like to try it on beats 2 and 4. So you'll do your ts sound and then breathe in on the rest beat. Ts, ts, ts. As we go through the track, keep that up, and then I'm going to mix it up and put the ts sound on every beat. So if you're feeling more confident and want to have a go at that, then join along with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great, I hope you managed some really good hi-hat sounds there. As hi-hat sounds are often used as filler sounds in between the main beats, it's a good idea to practice them with some syncopation as well. So let's have a go at putting those sounds off the beat. So imagine here's our beat, and we're going to put our TS sounds between them. So as you get more used to this, you might find that you naturally want to take those inhales between those sounds, which is fantastic. Okay, now let's try that with our track. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well done if you kept up with that one. It really is a workout. You might find that you get a little bit dizzy if you're not used to doing this and not used to taking these inhales really quickly. Don't worry if that happens, it's just because your body's not quite used to it. So take a rest, take a little sit down, and you'll be fine. Okay, so now it's time to try some sounds with our flute as well. So we're going to have our right hand on the barrel of the flute again, just to give it some stability, and we're going to practice with some A's. So we're going to be playing A's on beats 1 and 3, and we're going to do our open hi-hat sound on beats 2 and 4. You might like to try moving your flute out of the way for beats 2 and 4, so that we don't get any Aeolian sounds. All we're getting is the ts hi-hat sound on its own. So something like this. Try to feel the the difference between the position of your mouth for the hi-hat sound and the position that you have to get into for your flute embouchure. If you can minimise the distance between your beatbox sound position and your normal flute position, then it's going to make it easier to get the two to sync together. So let's try that again. Okay, when you're happy with that, we can move on to trying the Aeolian sound. So again, on beats 1 and 3, we're just going to have a straight flute tone, and on beats 2 and 4, we're going to use our TS sound, and we're going to have the flute there with us. So we've got the Aeolian sound. So now let's try that with the track, and let's make it easier for ourselves and try it with the Aeolian sound on beats 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. To having a go at the full flute tone with our ts sound. So again, rather like the bass drum sound, the idea is to keep the air going once you've made the sound and direct it into your flute with a flute embouchure. So this can be really tricky at first. It's going to take a lot of time to get your mouth to be able to move into those positions easily, so just keep on practicing. Now we're going to try some of those inhaled sounds that we talked about before. So I think it's great to try this now because I came to this quite late on in my flute boxing journey, and I found it really difficult to master these inhaled sounds, whereas I think if you do it straight away, you probably find it easier. So rather than just taking the inhale afterwards as we've been doing, we're going to do that, and we're going to do it with our teeth closer together, which is going to make that ts sound as we inhale. So something like that. So if you put that together with your normal ts sound, it should be easier. So if you go ts, exhale, and then inhale straight away. Now you can make all sorts of interesting rhythms using combinations of these inhales and exhales. So you can think of them as quavers, or even 16th notes. So let's try a little pattern. Let's imagine we've got crotchets on beats 1 and 2, and we're going to do our hi-hat open exhaled sounds. Then on 3 and 4, we're going to add in the inhaled sounds as quavers. So we've got 2 crotchets followed by 2 sets of quavers. Now because we're inhaling on the second quaver of those beats 3 and 4, it should be possible to keep this pattern going indefinitely. So that's something you can really impress your friends with. Okay, let's try this with the track. We're going to keep that pattern going, and then if you want to try out an extra ambitious version, on beats 3 and 4 we're going to make those quavers into semi-quavers. But just try that if you're feeling like you've got it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tried out some of the hi-hat sounds, I'm going to give you a little bit of a demo which shows what you can do with that hi-hat sound alone in a piece of music. So this piece is a study from Tilman Denhard's book Flute Beatboxing, which again is another book that I really recommend. This is the gold study on the hi-hat sound. So I really like that study because it mixes up the normal ts sound with lots of normal flute articulations, slurs and tonguing, double tonguing, and also the registers, so the lower register and then the next register up, which is quite hard to master at first. So great exercise for trying that out. Okay, so now we've got our bass drum sound from lesson 1 and we've got our hi-hat sound from this lesson 2. Before we get to the next sound, the k sound, which is a little bit harder to produce, let's see if we can have a go at putting those together. So here's a little extract from one of my beatbox arrangements, and it's my Pink Panther arrangement. So here's the score taken from the middle of the arrangement, and this is the flute 2 part. We've got the flute line there and the beatbox part underneath. So if we take a look at the beatbox part, you can see that all we've got is the bass drum followed by the hi-hat sound. So you might want to practice just going and alternating between those on the beat before you go any further. Then we've got our flute part, which is mostly just crotchets with the different sounds. Until we get to the 3rd bar, you can see there's a quaver at the end of the bar and a tied quaver across the bar, and that's quite tricky because when you have your tied note held on, you've still got to keep the beatbox rhythm going underneath. So you've got to keep that note going and then put the bass drum sound on the next beat. So let's see how that goes. So there we have it, and you could probably hear there how I was taking those sneaky breaths in places that you wouldn't normally expect. Of course, this is a duet arrangement, so the top part is playing the tune at the same time, so hopefully when the top part's got the tune playing, you can't actually hear those sneaky breaths in between. So that's it for lesson 2. If you'd like to get hold of my arrangement of the Pink Panther to have a go at, or any of the other arrangements that I've done, then you'll find the link in the email. I'll also include the link for Tilman Denhart's book in lesson 4. So keep practicing those bass and hi-hat sounds, and I'll see you soon for lesson 3.